Motor skills development is an area of real significant development during the first couple of years of life. There are huge changes taking place during those first couple of years. At birth, of course, babies have no motor control. They respond reflexively, so they're not controlling their muscles to respond. That's just happening reflexively. But during those first months of life, they begin to gain some motor control. So on the slide, you see a list of some different motor skills that develop during this period of time. So you can pause the video and read over those real quickly and see if you have some ideas about when babies develop those different skills. But we'll come back to that and give you kind of a glimpse of some of those times with a chart that we're going to look at shortly. But first, we're going to talk about a few other things related to motor skills development. We've already talked about the fact that motor skills development does rely on the development of muscle control, but it also relies on neurological development as well. So those two things, development of those muscles and the ability to control those muscles, along with neurological development, both play a really significant role in the development of different types of motor skills. And so when it comes to motor skills development, it follows those same principles that we talked about earlier with regards to prenatal development and development early in life. The cephalocaudal, the proximodistal, and then the mass to specific principles. So you can think about how those relate to motor skills development as you think about some of the skills that are developing in the first couple of years. One of the things that we're going to look at with those motor skills is sort of the average range when a lot of kids are developing those motor skills. But the thing to keep in mind about motor skills development, as well as with a lot of other things related to development, is that there is variability, particularly in the timing. And sometimes that variability can be pretty big. If you spend time with different children, or if you have children of different ages, you might be able to think back to when they achieved certain milestones. But even if you start to ask people, at what age did your child start walking or crawling or doing some of these different things, people are going to say different times. They're going to give you different ages. And sometimes those ages can vary quite a bit. I often share that I have two children. My oldest started walking at about 9-10 months of age, but my youngest was closer to 13 months of age when she started walking. I have a couple of nephews, one of whom is just a couple of months older than my oldest. But even though he was a couple of months older when she started walking, he was not yet walking. And it wasn't until he was closer to about 15 months before he actually started walking. And that was perfectly normal. So there's this broad range of time for a lot of these motor skills that we consider to be normal. So you'll see that variability in motor development from one child to the next. And in typical development, motor milestone mastery is not predictive of advanced or later intelligence. So basically what that means is even if a child does start doing some of those things really early, that doesn't mean that they are super intelligent or that they're always going to do very well or be ahead in other areas as well. But those motor milestones have widespread effects, or at least when children achieve those motor milestones, it allows them to more actively and more independently explore their world. And it also means that they may be a little bit more likely to get into trouble, to get themselves into dangerous situations and things like that. So it's at that point that we have to start doing things like baby proofing our environment and that kind of thing. So in terms of motor skills, we do make a distinction between what we call gross motor skills and fine motor skills. Gross motor skills are also referred to as the skills involved in locomotion. These are skills that involve large muscles in the body and that do allow us to move about or locomote in the world. And then, of course, the fine motor skills involve smaller muscles or smaller muscle groups and more finely tuned movements. So here are some examples of some of those motor milestones in the first couple of years. So things like being able to support one's own head. We know that at birth, especially if you've spent any time with a baby or ever held a newborn, you probably know that babies can't hold their heads unsupported. And that's why when you hold that newborn, people always remind you, support the head, be sure you're holding the head up, because they don't yet have that control. And so over on the left, you have the milestone, and over on the right, you have that age range when it's typically expected. So being able to support their own head and all of that. The third one up there rolls from tummy to back, so rolling over on their own. That's something that average age range is about 4 to 6 months. But again, it's important to keep in mind that some babies are going to do that earlier than 4 months. And so it's important that we not leave them unattended on surfaces that they could roll off of and get injured even before 4 months of age, because again, some babies are going to do that a little bit earlier. But a lot of these gross motor skills that you see here are things that do eventually help them be able to walk. So stand on their own, walk, that kind of thing. So again, these are some of those gross motor skills, those motor skills that are involved in locomotion. We also have those fine motor skills, and those fine motor skills do involve small body movements, especially of the hands and the fingers. So things like being able to grasp, being able to hold on to stuff, even being able to move one's arm, that kind of thing, and control that movement. That's part of that fine motor skill development. One of the things that we haven't talked about so far related to motor skills development is sequence. We've talked about the fact that there's variability in terms of the timing. So one child might start doing these things at one age, whereas another child starts doing them at a different age. There's variability in terms of the timing, but the thing that there's not variability with from one child to next is the sequence. The sequence of motor skill development is universal. So what that means is all babies develop certain skills before other skills. So in the chart of gross motor milestones that we were looking at, these are all things that lead up to walking. So babies follow that sequence in terms of when they develop those gross motor skills. These are some of the things that happen in that sequence of emerging fine motor skill development. So being able to grasp an object like a rattle, being able to reach to hold an object, and so on. So that list gives you that sequence. Now, when it comes to all motor skills, whether it is gross motor skills or fine motor skills, when they develop in terms of the timing is influenced by both culture and opportunity. And those would both be environmental types of things, but there's some evidence to suggest that genetics play a role in the timing of motor skills development as well. So when it comes to things like experience and culture and opportunity, there are a number of different factors that can affect the rate of development of some of these motor skills. Things like weight and size can play a role. Overweight children tend to master some of these skills more slowly, although the term overweight is kind of hard to be overweight as a baby. Not saying that it can't happen, but just being a little bit bigger can make a difference in terms of when babies develop some of these skills. The fact that for walking, for example, babies have to be able to support their body with their little legs. Their legs may not be able to support the weight of their body to begin with if they're a little bit larger. So that can make a difference. Another thing that can make a difference, infants that were born prematurely are seemingly slower than those who were full term. However, if we compare them to children who were conceived at the same time that they were, rather than children who were born at the same time that they were, we tend to see that they're at about the same place. So if we take that prenatal development into consideration, we can see them sort of lining up with other children who were conceived at about the same time that they were. Another thing related to opportunity is overprotection. Overprotection, or not really giving kids an opportunity to practice or try some of these things, tends to slow development. Things like attention and encouragement seem to accelerate development when it comes to motor skills. Since firstborns are often more protected than their siblings, parents frequently report that their first child was slower to develop in some of these areas, but it can be the opposite. I've also heard of cases where children who were the youngest of several siblings were a little bit slower, and that's often attributed to the fact that they have those older siblings who are willing to carry them around or do things for them that require those motor skills, and so they may not develop them as quickly. So again, culture, opportunity, play a really important role, but genes can play a role in the development of motor skills as well. So again, coming back to some of those fine motor skills, these are some of those fine motor milestones and the average ages at which children are sort of expected to do things. But again, it's important to keep in mind that there's variability. Some kids are going to do them earlier, some kids are going to do them later. So I think I sound like a broken record on that point, but that is an important thing to keep in mind. Now, motor skills development can influence other areas of development and other areas of functioning. Things like readiness for solid food. Motor skills development, particularly the fine motor skill of pinching and grasping, may play an important role in readiness for solid food. When babies can begin to, rather than just grabbing with their whole hand, when they can use their thumb and their first finger and pinch. That may signal that they are a little bit more ready for solid foods and that kind of thing. Because those motor skills and the development of those motor skills can be influenced by opportunity and environment, there are different types of play activities that can help with motor skills development. And again, this is another one of those slides that you can come back to, or you can pause the screen here to sort of read over the specific play activities and the area of motor skills that can be affected, as well as the age range when that might be important. So you may want to spend a little bit of time looking at this slide.